Hello everyone. So for this video I decided to do a quick tutorial on how the terrain material for that post that I had some time ago with the marshland, and how basically my video game project terrain material is set up. And some folks on the comments asked about it, so I thought I'd make a quick video, hopefully quick, on how that is made. So yeah, let's get to it. Now, the one thing to mention is, this way of making the terrain material is probably, it works for me. It's, for some people might not be the best option, but to me it kind of, makes it look a little cleaner, with the added cost of, since it's based off of material functions. And it might, if you're planning on doing a lot of changes to your terrain material, you have to take into account that it's every time you change the texture with a material function, you have the time of the shader being compiled. So to me, it looked a lot cleaner, less spaghetti kind of thing in the master terrain material, so that's why I went with it. So let's get to it. Alright, so I'm going to create just a default kind of terrain here, and there it is. Again, I just have a skylight, a directional light, and a BP sky sphere added in here. The totally basic stuff that you can add to a project, and this is the first person template in Unreal. Okay, so from Megascans I have a couple of three textures. One of them is this mossy ground, one of them is this swamp water, and one of them is this kind of wet sand ground, muddy surface. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to create my master underscore terrain material, and then I'm going to start by creating my first material function. So I'm going to be calling this mf material function, and then I'm going to start with mossy ground. Okay, so let's take a look at what we add in here. So you'll see there's an output result, and first thing that I want to do is actually, this is the mossy ground, so I'm going to bring in my albedo, displacement, normal, and roughness. So the displacement is going to play a vital part in our terrain, height-based terrain blending. So hopefully to some of the experts out there, I didn't make any misnaming of this. Alright, so most important thing to go with is texture coordinates. That's what we definitely need. And along with that, I'm going to add an input scale, or a function input, and this is going to be a scalar, and I'm going to call this UV multi, because just how repetitive your texture you want to be. For me, with terrain, I've noticed that it's best to keep it around 0.2. At least that's what seems to be working for me. Okay, so I'm going to be setting this to 1 all around, and I'm going to be plugging this into my height map to begin with. Okay, I'm also going to plug this into my bump offset node, which is going to feed our albedo, roughness, and normal UVs. Along with the bump offset, what I'm going to be adding to the height is my displacement. So add that in. I'm going to use the red channel. And we need a scalar for our height ratio input. So let's add that in. And this is going to be our height ratio. So that's in there. Now we want to also have an output for the height, because once we place our layer blend nodes in the master material, we need the height for each one of the material functions to know how to blend between textures. So if we were to look at this mossy ground, like this texture for example, if you paint for example the swamp water, is going to have a flatter um, displacement. So if we want to paint some kind of this mossy ground on top of it, you know, if you have a lower strength on your paint brush, you'll see that the rocks are going to come up first, kind of through the swamp water. So for a visual look is, you know, we're going to finish this off, and then you'll see exactly how that works out. So let's do a little bit of kind of a better control over our displacement. So for that, I'm going to be using a power node and a multiplication node. So and a multiply node, and these are going to go into a function output, and the function output for this is going to be height. So height, there we go. Okay, so let's get a couple of the UV multi. This one is going to be our height power. So height power, and duplicate that. Oh, come on. So let's try this again. Height power. There we go. Oh well, this is annoying. Need to click out of it. Height power. Okay, there we go. And now we can duplicate it. Control W and put it into multiply. And this one is height multiply. Now the nice thing about the material functions is that I create one of them, and then I can just duplicate and only replace the textures in there. Okay, now in order to put this into output result, what I need to do is actually I'm going to make a make material attributes. So because this one is what's going to get passed to our function output, and this is going to hold the base, roughness, and normal. First of all, for the base, I want to do a little bit of excuse me, a little bit of enhancement on it, and that will be by adding a function input, and this one's going to be a vector 3, which is nice to have that at least for that time, and it's going to be the tint. So I just want to be able to tint my texture, my albedo, and we're going to multiply it with the tint and pass it into the base color. So let's set the tint to a default value of 1, 1, and 1. So that gives you white basically. We'll do the same for our roughness, but this one's going to be a little bit different. We're going to use kind of the same as we did for the height. So I'm going to duplicate these nodes and just place them in here. So this one's going to be our roughness. Let's rename these to be actual roughness power, and then roughness multiply. Now I have quite a few of these in here. You probably won't need all of them. It's totally up to you. To me, it gives a little bit more control. So let's plug in our roughness in there. So we have our roughness power and our roughness multiply, and let's add the normal as well. So what I've been using for this is a flatten normal, and of course for the flatness we just need a scalar. So let's duplicate one of its scalars here, and this is going to be, I'm going to call this normal intensity. Okay, let's plug this in, and we'll add it to our normal. Excellent. Okay, so that is one of our functions. One thing that I might want to change when I create these in my main is I'm going to be lowering my the height, multi, and scalar. I'm not very used to. I know what the kind of the basic, the base, it's a 1 or then a 0, kind of the top and the lowest value, but I'm not entirely sure how to set it to like a 0.1, for example. So again, I'm quite a beginner with Unreal, so especially with material editing. Okay, so that's our material function. Now let's take a look at what needs to happen in our master material. So let's see, where did I create my material function? Alright, so we have the material function for mossy ground here, and let's jump into the master material real quick and kind of do the base setup for it for now, and then we'll create the other two material functions, which is just a little bit of repetitive work, so apologies for that. But I mean, I also want to give you kind of an idea of the, kind of the time that it, kind of just from 0 to completeness, so to speak. So maybe, shaded compiling, I'm not going to cut that out. You can skip ahead on YouTube. Okay, so in here, I'm just going to click and drag my mossy ground. And as you can see, we have quite a few inputs now that I think about it. Maybe I should have trimmed them down, but like I said, I do kind of like them. So I'm going to keep, I'm going to press down S for scalar and add my first scalar parameter, which is going to be mossy ground height ratio. Okay, so I'm going to need to duplicate this a few more times. So we have the height power now. Let's add that in. Power. Then we have the height multiply. Multiply. Oh, just multiply, multi. I think will be fine. Then the tint is going to be a little different. It's going to be a constant 3 vector. So let's convert this to a parameter so we have access to it. So this is going to be mossy ground tint. And then we have 3 more of these for our roughness. So let's add that in. So we have roughness. There we go, roughness ratio. Then we have a height power, or roughness power. And actually there was only 2 of them, so this one's going to be normal intensity. Normal intensity. Okay, perfect. And our last one is our UV multiplier. So UV multi. Okay, so let's set some base values for this. What I found that works best for me was for the height and the height ratio. I found that 0.1 works pretty well, so it doesn't like blow up the texture for its the height of it. Then the height power. This one 1 seems to work well, and the height multiplication is 1 as well. Then the mossy ground, these ones are going to keep at just the default white, so it doesn't lose any of the, and we can tint it in the instance, material instance. Then for the roughness, I'm just going to set these to 1 as well, and then 1, normal. Normal, I'm going to leave at 0 for now, because with the flattened normal, it is a little bit of an interesting effect. If you go to 1, it looks like it's pushing it inward or down, and then to negative, it's pushing it upwards. So I'm going to leave it at 0, and we'll just tweak it in the instance. And then for the UV, as I was saying, 0.2 seemed to have worked pretty well. So let's plug these in. We have the height ratio, power, multi, tint, roughness, multiply, normal intensity, and UV multiplier. Okay, now before we put it into our master terrain, we need to add a way to blend between them. So I'm going to use a layer blend landscape. Now the layer blend landscape takes in basically your layers of terrain textures or terrain materials, or in my case, functions. So I'm going to be adding 3 of these because there's I'm going for this particular tutorial I'm only going to do 3. Always make sure to name the layer because you're not going to be able to see anything when you try and paint it. So this one's going to be, first one is going to be, let's see, mossy ground. So there is our mossy ground, and this is going to be a height blend. And as you can see, each one, whenever you use a height blend, you'll have your layer, which is going to contain everything that comes out of result, or I mean, in our case, this layer blend is going to be, let's actually label this a little bit better. So this one is going to be base color. So we're going to have each one of these for each one of, base color, normal, and roughness, or roughness and normal. So this one's going to be roughness, and then we'll create another one, and this one is going to be, and the thing, one thing that I wanted to do is actually, I'm going to delete these real quick because I wanted to set all the layers in here before duplicating them. It's just a little bit less time consuming. So we have mossy ground. Then the second one is going to be, let's call this one swamp water. Swamp water. And again, we'll set the height blend. And the third one is going to be wet sand, which to me looks more like looks more like a mud kind of texture, but we'll go with the naming from Quixel. So let's go ahead and duplicate these and duplicate again. I'm going to try and space them out a little bit. So we have base color. Let's call this one roughness. Roughness. And then normal. Perfect. Okay. So let's kind of clean this up a little bit. I'm going to move this to the top because it's kind of the top level layer there. One thing that I want to do is actually I'm going to make these as a group. So this one's going to be mossy ground group. So whenever once I have the other material functions as well, I'm going to be able to set them in their own little individual group, so that way you can easily differentiate between them when you look at the instance and edit the settings. Okay, so let's comment this out. This one's going to be mossy ground. Alright, so what do we need to plug in here? Well, we pretty much have kind of the backbone of this in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a break material attributes. So the material attributes is going to provide everything that we need to feed into these nodes. Let's start with the base color. Then what do we have? Roughness. We have the roughness in here. And then we have the normal, and normal goes in here. So let's connect these layer blends to our master terrain, roughness, and normal. Okay, but how do we blend between them? Well, we have the height, so let's get the height in here as well. So I'm gonna use a little bit of a reroute node here. We have that, the roughness, and the mossy ground. Okay, so that's one of the layers. Let's go ahead and create the other two material functions. So what I'm going to do is going to be a little bit easier. I'm going to duplicate this, and this one's going to be mossy ground. So now I have swamp water. And while we're here, I'm going to assign all the textures to this. Let's take a look. We have the displacement, and let's bring in the displacement. There we go. We have the albedo. Let's plug in albedo. We have the roughness, and this one's swamp water, so it's going to be a lot shinier surface, and the normal. Okay, so we have the swamp water in place. Let's bring in and make the, I'm going to duplicate this again, and this one's going to be our wet sand. So wet sand, there we go. Open this one up real quick, and let's feed in just the same as before. We'll feed in the textures as needed. So we have the displacement. There we go. So displacement is it's got quite a little bit more info in it. So it's going to look, you know, quite interesting once we start painting and just use that little bit of a smaller intensity on the brush strength, and we'll see kind of the little peaks of um, the texture kind of peeking through the water, you know, just coming up through the water. Alright, so now we have the normal. Perfect. Okay, so we have all the textures in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and close these for now. And let's bring them in here. So we have the mossy ground already in place. Let's bring in our swamp water, and then our wet sand. So what we'll do is pretty much the identical thing that we've done here. So I'm going to duplicate these nodes, and it's just going to be a matter of renaming the group. This is going to be swamp water, and renaming these scalar values. So swamp water. This is pretty much the most time-consuming part of this, so bear with me. Swamp water. And almost there for this one. Great. All right, let's hook these in. 1, 2, and there's 3. Tint, roughness ratio. I'm not entirely sure why I named them like that. I guess I need to. This was the copy and paste, which you gotta be careful with. So basically, this one should have been the power, roughness power, and this is the roughness multi. At least there's only 2 of them. Roughness power and roughness multi. Okay. So we'll do the same thing. We'll duplicate the break material nodes and feed the results into here. And let's feed in the base color to swamp, the roughness to our swamp layer, and the normal to our swamp layer. Now let's use our height for the blending. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Let's make sure this one is its own group. Perfect. I'm going to do just a comment here. Swamp water. Not womp, but swamp. There we go. And one more to go. The same thing. I'm going to duplicate these ones. And let's rename them to be wet sand. Sand. Alright, let's make sure this one's in its right group. Wet sand. There. Okay. Let's connect these. So we have the height ratio, power, multiply, tint, roughness power, roughness multiply, normal intensity, and the UV multiplication. And we need to break our material attributes just like before for the result. Let's connect the base color. So we have base color into base. Oh, come on. It's kind of annoying once you have like one of these, you know, material nodes or materials that is getting a little bigger, and you just have to, you know, try and easily navigate to it. So, and there is that. And last thing is going to be the height. So let's hook up the height into these three nodes. So we have height, and the last one, yay. And one more thing, I'm just going to do a comment here for wet sand. Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and save this. And now we can actually get to go and wait for the shaders to compile. Well, let's create an instance off of this. I'm going to create a material instance, and that's the master terrain instance. And what I'm going to do is make sure you select your terrain, and I'm going to drag and drop this into our landscape material. So there's going to be, for whatever reason, compiling into the negatives, because that's normal. Let's go to paint. So you'll see all the three terrain layers here. First thing we need to do is actually I'm going to add a weight blended layer, and I'm just going to go with the basic label of this. You can save it in a another folder, but I'm just going to keep it there. Already exists. Let's actually make it into let's save it into maps for now. So there's that one. Now our mossy ground. Let's I've created for that one. Okay, so let's do the swamp water, and again just a weight blended layer, and the last one, let's kind of move this to the side a little bit, and a weight blended layer for that as well. Let's use that in maps. There we go. Okay, so the terrain already got filled in with our with the, I guess it was the first one that I've selected. I'm assuming that's why. So let's see about painting a little bit of, there's going to be some shaders being compiled, as I was saying. So I'm going to cue elevator music, hopefully. So hopefully this gets completes compiling the shaders in a little bit. And then we can do a little bit of painting at that point, and just to see how things blend together, and a little bit of that height blend that I wanted to show you, because that's kind of something that I kind of like. It's pretty cool. Okay, so we have the swamp water. Let's also paint the wet sand, because it's going to need to compile some shaders as well. And there's the wet sand. And so right now I think we can, since this is just a base of how the textures come in, maybe we can do, update a little bit of some of the settings on this. So I think what we could do is let's open up our terrain instance. I think the biggest change that we might want to make is and at least that I've done to this particular water texture, or this particular swamp texture, is actually make it a little darker. I think Quixel has a second one like this, which is quite a lot darker, so that's why I think I went with this one. So in my terrain material instance, what I'm going to do, and actually let me bring this in and just see if I can dock it on the side somewhere. Can I? Oh, I was thinking there's a way to like dock it to a specific edge. Anyways, so I'm just going to play around a little bit with the roughness multiplier for some of these nodes, just to get a little bit more of that shininess in there. So let's take a look at swamp water, because this is pretty much the biggest, one of the bigger changes that we're going to do. So the swamp water, I'm going to take a look at the tint and probably just darken it a little bit. There we go, that looks a little bit better. So there's that. And also for the muddy water, this wet sand, I guess, I'm going to play around with the roughness multiplication here. So let's see if we can get something a little bit more shiny. Because, you know, the default is set to 1, but maybe I want something a little bit more like this to provide a bit of transition into my kind of this mossy ground terrain. And for this one, maybe I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up the roughness. That's a little too much. Just to lower the roughness a little bit. Kind of like so. And I can probably play with the tint a little bit, maybe make it a little darker. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. And let's make the ground terrain a little darker as well. Kind of to match the rest of that a little bit better, especially the sand, especially the swamp area. Okay. Let's do a little bit of, let's see, can we tone this down a little bit? It's a little too strong. Maybe make it 5. And then the skylight, that's already pretty good value. Okay. So that is pretty much it. Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to show is I mentioned the height-based blend. So now that I have this kind of flatter surface here with this kind of swampy area, let's paint the mossy ground. Let's see how that works out. So as you can see, you know, it's kind of coming out a little bit more where the higher sections of the textures are at. So as you can see, the kind of the rocks are coming up. The thing of it is also the center of the brush is got the most strength. So let's probably bring it down a little bit and see how that works. Yeah, so as you can see, there's some of that higher areas of it that come up first. And the other nice thing about the height blend texture, I mean, to me at least, this is the one that I've experimented with most, is kind of how it blends in with the other layers. So you know, the swamp water, if I was to paint it over here, you'll see that it creates a really just nice little puddle, and it's not like a really blotchy kind of section. So there you go. And as you can see, it also flattens out a little bit the mossy ground. So, and then you know, we have the wet sand, which kind of works the same in the similar fashion. So if I was to click in here a few times, as you can see, it just comes out a little bit like that. It does retain a lot of, you know, blends in really nice with the wet sand. Well, I mean with the swamp water. So there you have it. That's pretty much gonna be it. I know it's been a kind of a longer video, you know, about half an hour. But hopefully that gives a little bit of explanation on why I chose to go with this kind of this type of material, using the material functions versus putting everything into this master terrain material. Now it looks a little cleaner, I think, to me. So and you have all these options for the different options that you can provide for the material textures. So that's going to be it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any comments, any suggestions. Like I said, I'm quite a beginner with Unreal, so but hopefully this is helpful to some folks. All right, thank you guys for watching.